everybody. Welcome to the Mary
and Jerry
podcast.
I'm Jerry.
I'm Mary.
And we're glad you're here.
We're so glad you're here. This is a podcast where nothing is off limits. We talk about faith and family,
life and love,
marriage.
Let's talk about sex, baby.
Let's
talk
about that
about
sometimes
you
too.
And me.
Bacon.
Yeah. Let's talk about sex, baby.
Today,
let's talk about you and me.
We're going to be talking about sex and NFP. So if you have little people in the room, you might want to put your headphones in or just listen to it when you and your spouse or significant other, your fiance, whatever.
Okay, I just want to be very clear. This was a topic that many of our listeners have asked for. This is not one that
This is not one that we would have chosen ourselves.
Naturally picked, but we are here for you guys. So you asked, now you're going to get it.
So during this podcast, we're going to explore the challenges and rewards of practicing natural family planning, or NFP as we know it, within marriage. And we're going to try and address some of the concerns and misconceptions about NFP, offering a little clear guidance, I hope, and practical advice. We're going to share our personal journey with NFP, and maybe that will help you navigate your journey. And we want to emphasize the importance of communication, the importance of faith and mutual respect with making NFP work. So, Jerry,
yes, dear.
What does the church say NFP is?
Aha, see, we looked it up. We have it straight.
We wanted to be very clear on this. So here we go.
The Roman Catholic Church teaches that natural family planning is a morally acceptable way for married couples to space or limit births. The Catechism of the Catholic Church describes the teaching as follows. This is CCC, paragraph 2368. For just reasons, spouses may wish to space the births of their children. It is their duty to make certain that their desire is not motivated by selfishness, but in conformity with the generosity appropriate to responsible parenthood. Moreover, they should conform their behavior to the objective criteria of morality.
Okay, so let's break that down just a little bit. Back in the day, when our parents were married, when our grandparents were married, there was this thing known as the rhythm method.
Back in the day.
And so people used to give NFP or the rhythm method a bad rap, rightfully so, because they didn't have the science to back it up. So everybody would be saying, well, we tried the rhythm method, but we had 6 children. Well, the science now on the rhythm method is basically they were coming together as a couple like during their most fertile time. So the science wasn't correct on that. Now we have several different methods of natural family planning. But what we want to start with is, why would you ever use natural family planning? Okay. So there is something called a grave reason to avoid pregnancy, right? If you don't have medical insurance would be an example. If there's some physical reason, you're ill, you're fighting cancer, what have you, things of that nature that you would want to avoid pregnancy. Somebody lost their job. These are just some of the reasons that we've considered over the journey of our NFP experience. And, these are considered grave reasons. And so you discern every single month, right, in an intimate conversation, is this a good time to have a baby during your fertile periods of life, right? You're going to read another catechism, aren't you?
Well,
because I feel like we should really kind of dive into our own story first.
Well, there's a follow-on. Well, but people ask,
right?
Because a lot of people say, for good or bad, well, isn't natural family planning just Catholic birth control?
No.
Or Catholic contraception?
No.
No. Here's what it says.
This is a 2370.
This is paragraph 2370.
Yeah.
Periodic continence, that is, the methods of birth regulation based on self-observation, we'll talk about that some more in a little bit, and the use of infertile periods is in conformity with the objective criteria of morality. These methods respect the bodies of the spouses, encourage tenderness between them, and favor the education of an authentic freedom. In contrast, Every action which, whether in anticipation of the conjugal act or in its accomplishment, or in the development of its natural consequences, proposes, whether as an end or as a means to render procreation impossible, is intrinsically evil. So,
So what is the intrinsic evil here? We're talking about birth control pills, we're talking about condoms, you're talking about the diaphragm, the IUD, anything that is not of the body, of the natural body that you either ingest, which by the way, the World Health Organization says that birth control is a number 1 carcinogen. It's like
class one.
class 1 carcinogen. It is like the worst of the worst for your body because it basically tells your body that you're pregnant all the time. And then you have, all of those different things that impede upon the natural act and impede upon the freedom of two people coming together fully, completely, naturally
Hmm.
in order to create life, which is what the purpose of marriage is. The purpose of marriage is to procreate, right? To expand the church. And so we'll get into a little bit later on in this conversation about infertility, about how NFP can be used to help infertility. And also that question that we get a lot of, well, what if we aren't blessed with a baby and we aren't able to adopt? Then does that make us, not important in the church? Actually, the catechism speaks directly to that as well, and we'll get there. But let's kind of stop here for a second and just sort
Okay.
of talk about our own NFP journey. So we, as you all know, that have been around this podcast for a while, when Jerry and I got married, Jerry was not Catholic. I was. We got pregnant before we were married. We didn't follow the chastity rules of the church then. And after the birth of our daughter, Courtney, when I was 5, she was 5 weeks, 4 weeks, actually, 4 weeks. So month
Five.
4, no, 4 weeks when I
Oh,
got married.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Because of my lack of faith, because of our lack of trust in the Lord, because of our immaturity in our faith and in our immaturity as humans, we made a decision to have my tubes tied at the age of 25. And we ended our ability to have children. So you might be listening to this thinking, if you ended your ability to have children at 25, then why the heck are you telling me that I have to use NFP, that I have to even consider this as part of a Catholic or Christian marriage? So I'm looking at you, Jerry,
Mhm.
and how would you answer that question?
Well, it's like a lot of things that we learned or didn't learn, right? Because this was way back in the 1980s. And
NFP did exist then, dear.
NFP
Yeah,
did exist, but it wasn't. Now,
it
again,
wasn't talked about.
it wasn't talked about, it wasn't taught, and it wasn't really discussed. Now, again, we had like the world's shortest and clearly most inadequate marriage preparation because, like many things that we had to discover on our own at a great price, we didn't know that there were other options out there to, do family planning, right? I mean, it was,
We just knew abstinence. That was it.
yeah, abstinence, which,
Complete abstinence.
you know,
Which, when you tell a young naval aviator complete abstinence who isn't Catholic, that's not going to go over so
yeah,
well.
that's not going to go over so well.
But I think what I was looking for in that answer, my
Mhm.
love,
Yes.
was when you remove God from your bedroom, someone else is ready to take his place.
Well, that's very true too. Yeah. I mean, it was part of our whole,
It was part of our downward slide into pornography and
yes.
and those abuses in our marriage.
Yes, because we didn't have that that
Yeah.
conversation about sex that we should have,
Yeah.
"Let's talk about sex, baby."
Okay, that's going to be the theme song for this
That is the
episode.
theme song.
So at 25, we ended our ability to have children. We removed that conversation from our married life and from our intimate life. And what happened to us was just it did not end well. Okay. Now let's back it up just even a little bit further. When I was 14 years old, this is before PCOS was even a diagnosis. I have PCOS, but I wasn't diagnosed with it. I just had really horrible periods. And so my mom took me to our physician, our family physician. And at the age of 15, I was placed on birth control pills. I was not sexually active, but I was placed on birth control pills because of those periods. And at such a young age to be on a very strong pill, that the ones that are here today are not what they were then. really began a journey for me that I didn't even know I was on, that messed with my hormones and just messed with my fertility, well, even till today. Like, the result of it still exists today. And so, when Jerry and I got married, I mean, when we got pregnant before we were married, I was on the pill when we got pregnant.
Right.
And then we miscarried that baby. And then in between our children, I went back on the pill. And again, there were other miscarriages. So there are things we know now in our fertility story, when we go back and we look and we can see a direct correlation to the birth control pill.
Hmm. Well, even to the tubes being tied,
Even
right?
the
Because
tubes being
10,
tied.
10
10 years
years later.
later, I had to have a partial hysterectomy because I had fibroids that were I had one fibroid in particular that was the size of a calcified softball. So it was the size of a softball and had gone through my uterine lining.
It was a tumor.
It was yeah. And then when they opened me up to take that out, I had what they call stalagmites. So I had I had pre-uterine cancer all throughout my body. Science has proven some links back to tubal ligation and to the use of the pill that would have set me up beautifully for this horrific situation. So I am not going to say yay or nay. We are not scientists. We are not doctors. Do your own research. There is so much out there today that is available for your information on those connections. But
Right.
what we want to talk about really is kind of how we came to this place now of being huge proponents of NFP and all the different methods that are available to you. In a past podcast, we explained going and becoming marriage mentors and that we learned the symptothermal method of NFP in order to do the work within our parish that our pastor had asked us to. And we shared our healing story of Blackrock and learning theology of the body. So you can listen to a past episode on that. But one of the challenges that came from that weekend that was a little surprising to Jerry and I was when we spoke with one of the priests after we had sort of had this beautiful confession and we're learning, I think it was on day 4, after we had renewed our vows. He suggested to us as a moment of reparation for what had happened in our marriage, what choices we had made, for us 1 week a month to practice NFP, to abstain from intimacy, physical intimacy.
The conjugal act.
Yes, in order to sort of make
Offer it up.
reparation, to offer it up for what we had done. And that began sort of our emotional healing, would you call,
Hmm.
during and I still had my ovaries, so I was still experiencing, even though I didn't have my uterus or my cervix, I was still experiencing the hormonal up and down. So I knew when that week was, and so
So did I.
yes, you did, and
Just saying.
so we chose that week, and so for until I went into menopause, we abstained 1 week a month in reparation for all that we had done poorly, the poor choices we had made. So if you are in a situation where you find yourself midlife, previous to midlife, and maybe you have made some of these permanent decisions that we made, and now you find yourself sort of, oh my gosh, I want to fix it, I want to do better, that's something that you can do. We also looked into getting my tubal ligation reversed. And I was not a candidate for it because that was right when we found the fibroid. So the Lord sort of took care of that decision for us and allowed certain things to happen. So that's a little bit about like our actual NFP story and how we sort of came to this place of really mentoring and counseling couples to not make that permanent choice, to not do the vasectomy, to not do the tubal ligation, because we didn't even acknowledge the emotional impact or the spiritual impact of that decision for many, many years.
Hmm.
You can jump in anytime, my love.
Well, being a very intensely practical man, so I One of the things that surprised me about NFP, and I know Mary hinted about it, and she'll talk about it more later, is it's two conversations, right? So it's a conversation of the woman with her body, the wife with her body, and then the couple as a couple, right? So as we were doing the training to do the symptothermal method, which I guess now is like passe, right? They've got all
Well,
these
they've got the
monitors and there's a whole bunch of different ones, right? I mean, and at this point,
Mhm.
I think there was basically what was that, the
The Crichton,
Crichton and symptothermal, and now there's probably
Marquette
like
is now
yeah,
there.
they've got a whole bunch now. But
Mhm.
but one of the things
There's
that
several others that we probably aren't even aware of.
well, yeah, by
Yeah.
this time. So one of the things that was fascinating to me as we started teaching this and learning about it to teach is that it's all about a conversation and learning about your own rhythm, to use that word, right? Because when we got into it, I'm like, okay, so without going into all the details, basically there's really a short, like 4 or 5 days a month that you can really become pregnant,
Right.
right? And they went through all the science and biology and anthropology of da 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 da, why it is that basically men are fertile all the time but women are only fertile 4 or 5 days in a month, and then how do you figure that out, or at least
Mucus is
try
king.
to. And
Yeah.
then what, but the interesting thing was is they said, okay, so we know that this 4 or 5 days of the month is the highest probability, right? They like to use that word like weathermen, highest probability of becoming pregnant. But one of the things about doing natural family planning is you're always open to
To
life,
life.
right?
Mhm.
So even if you're, a couple of days either side of that and, surprise, that's a conversation that you as a couple have. And I think that was the big thing, when you get to the bottom line of it, because you know me, I'm a bottom line guy. What NFP really does is get you as a couple talking about one of the two things
That we always fight
that we
about.
always fight about, right? Let's talk about
Sex
sex,
and money.
baby, right?
And
Um,
those two things kind of combine in the NFP conversation because a lot of the times you're like, can we afford another child? And what does that mean? Are there sacrifices that we can make financially? Are there things for every couple, those grave matters, the things that you would be abstaining for are different, right? You bring in the history from your family of origin. You bring in all of your kind of financial hangups. You bring in your intimate hangups. I mean, when you're talking about bringing another child into the world, sometimes it's a joyful conversation, and other times it's a, oh my gosh, this is happening. What are we going to do? And that's just humanity. That's our humanity. And, all children, all children are a miracle. They're a miracle. Sometimes when the Lord allows them to arrive can feel not so miraculous, can feel terrifying for whatever the outside reasons are. But the challenges of NFP, they kind of irregular cycles. If you're a woman who has irregular cycles, that can be challenging for NFP to get that I hate using the word rhythm, but to get that the science down, your lifestyle, how you choose to live, what is important to you as a couple and as a family. That is one of the challenges of NFP. The emotional toll of that conversation, we can't ignore that, right? I know for us, I got my tube side and a week later, Courtney started having seizures. And that took me on a journey for the next 7 years that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. So these are some of the challenges that come, but it's also, if you look at some of the statistics, I think it's something like couples that use NFP are like 4% of the divorce rate.
you're
4%.
much less likely because again, one
Because
of
again, you're
those
talking about it,
you're
right? You're
talking about it.
you're not just you're not separating God, you're not separating yourself from the decision to have
Your
a baby.
fertility.
Yeah, you're not separating yourself from your fertility, sorry. And so therefore, you're always in this conversation. And it also has a flip side. If you're someone who is dealing with primary or secondary infertility, NFP can be a huge help to come in and see and identify the problems of what's happening in your fertility. And I'm not saying it's an answer, I'm saying that it's part of the puzzle piece, right? When you're kind of trying to look through and see why aren't we getting pregnant, and it does assist in that. So it's just a very complicated conversation, especially in today's culture where children are not looked upon they're looked upon as commodities. The abortion rate just keeps climbing. Although I did see in the news recently that it was beginning to decline in certain demographics. But what about some of the benefits of NFP?
So this is, I think one of that is that, again, you're having that conversation, right? And one of the things that we talk about to couples, sorry, when we're doing the marriage prep and something is, it's the children thing, right? Like how many, does she want a big family? He doesn't want a big family. She comes from a big family, he comes from a little family. And there's that question of, you know, because when we talk to a lot of couples, they're like, "Well, I don't know when we're ready to have kids." I'm like, "Well, sweetheart, you're never ready to have kids."
Let's talk about that for just a second. You know, we're not ready to have kids. We hear this a lot in engaged couples. My answer is quite simple, and it might even be a little brusque. If you're not ready to have children, then you're not ready to get married.
Mhm.
Because according to the church's teachings, you need to, openness to family. That's part of the vows that you take. You're actually saying that on your wedding day, that you will be open to receiving children from the Lord.
Did they say be fruitful and multiply
They
like
do.
they did at our wedding?
They did 7 times at our wedding.
7 times
We
at our
counted
wedding.
them.
Yeah.
And even then, we still, chose what we chose. And we
We
chose
messed that up.
well, yeah, we did royally. We chose ourselves instead of God.
Mhm.
And instead of walking in that trust with the Lord, NFP takes trust. Now, there's so many extenuating circumstances in life. Like I said, those grave reasons are different for every couple. But if you're not ready to have kids, this idea that you walk into your marriage and then you wait to have children for a year or two because you want couple time. I have opinions.
I can tell. Um,
If somebody says that to you, what do you say to them?
well, so,
We're going to get pushback.
well, so
You say you're not ready to be married.
there's a couple of ways to this. So we have had couples come up to us and at marriage prep when we're doing like a talk or something to say, and we get this a lot. Like, so said, so what's the deal with the Catholic Church? All they do is say sex is just for having kids, and you should have as many kids as possible. And I'm like, no. First of all, let's cover the sex thing, right? Let's talk about sex.
Oh, here we go.
Because again, this is part of what we learned at Theology of the Body, and this is one of the huge misconceptions about the Catholic Church.
We
Okay,
love
here it
sex.
is. Ready? We love sex.
We do.
Sex is great.
It's a unitive act.
In its proper
Context.
right? Which is a marriage between a man and a woman, right?
Mhm.
So
a biological man and a biological woman.
So the two things that we learned is that sex is both procreative and it is unitive, right? And one is just as important as the other.
Yes.
And then, like Mary said, everybody's all about the unitive thing, but it's like, no, if you're getting married now, if there's, this is where the people walk the fine line. Okay. And this is one of the challenges of NFP is there actually, and hey,
I'm not going to judge what that grave reason is.
If you want to comment on this, hey, knock yourself out. We've had this conversation a lot. You're not going to shock us, amaze us, or hurt our feelings. Is there a grave reason, like, hey, you genuinely are just starting out, you have no money, no insurance, whatever, or is it just, hey, we want to just have fun for the first 2 years as a couple? Now, that is for you as a couple
to decide.
You
and the Lord Jesus.
Right? That's what this is all about. Now, again, the church is very clear that yes, there are morally acceptable reasons to space, delay,
Right.
not prevent. See, that's the key word is
Right.
prevent. And that's one of the things about NFP is,
It
again,
never prevents.
it never prevents. Now, you can play the odds, so to speak, but you're not actively trying to prevent or disrupt, if that's the right word, a pregnancy. The second thing that I thought was very interesting, and I get this a lot. This amazes me about the pro-abortion lobby is they're like, well, abortion is health care for who, right? I mean, I'm going to step in it, but that's okay because I will. Pregnancy is not a disease. It's not
No.
something that has to be treated, right? It's, you know, a baby is not a parasite that you have to remove because it's inconvenient. You know, this
It's a
is
human being,
it's a human being.
fully
And
human.
this is one of the things that always kind of amazes me when they get when the abortion lobby gets on there. It's healthcare kick. I'm like, no, really isn't.
The only time that the Catholic Church accepts the ending of a life is an ectopic pregnancy, which is when the conception happens within the fallopian tube and it does not move into the womb, and therefore it will take the life of the mother as well as the life of the child. Okay. That's when they go in surgically and they remove part of the fallopian tube and the baby, and it's the end of the baby's life. There are other very, very grave and very rare circumstances in which they will go in and take the life of the child to save the life of the mother. It's not because the baby has trisomy 18. It's not because the baby won't live outside the womb. There, when those tragic circumstances happen, when you have anencephaly, when you have different deformities, we as a church believe that you carry that baby as long as possible, and then you deliver that baby, whether the baby survives outside the womb or not. That baby's life is honored, that baby's life is given respect. And we have traveled with family members, we have traveled with friends who have all faced these very challenging decisions when a pro-abort doctor will say to them, "Why would you put yourself through that if your child might not even survive outside the womb?" Well, because it's not our choice. It's not in our decision wheelhouse. That's up to God. God's going to allow what he allows. And so, now I say all of this in great humility and knowing what my own journey and my own decisions have been. And I say this not in judgment of anyone that will hear this, not in judgment of any woman who may have had an abortion that's listening to this, not in judgment of any woman who's gotten their tubes tied or their husband's gotten a vasectomy. I will remove the plank from my own eye before removing the splinter from yours. Okay. So that's between you and God. And I just know that Jerry and I have made very poor decisions when it came to this particular topic that have affected us for the remainder of our lives.
Hmm.
We both feel there should be more Lenaburgs running around, but they're not. And so at that point, then we go and when we recognized what we had done was a mortal sin, I went to confession, Jerry went to confession, and we received absolution. But the practical application of our decision still exists, still exists, as in we don't have any more children. So this is a really hard topic to kind of dive into, and it gets people really riled up. And I get that. I understand that. We're talking about so many different things, both practical and spiritual and emotional situations.
Yeah. And again, don't want to minimize the challenges
Yes.
of actually practicing NFP. Again, we have many couples that are friends with us,
Well, they've had multiple children and they're getting older and they're like,
and they're practicing NFP, and it's
mhm,
challenging, right? Because biology is biology, right?
yes.
There is a I had a interesting discussion once with my deacon friend about men, right? So here's a shocker, men. We have cycles too.
You do.
We have can I use my favorite phrase?
What?
We have very amorous times of the month, I'll
Yes.
just say that,
Mhm.
which may or may not align with your spouse's fertile time of the month. That's,
Mhm.
like, by design, see, because it's like, "Hey, baby. Hey, baby. Hey, baby. Oh, look, it's a baby."
Right.
Right? And that can be challenging because, if and we've also had situations where people have come up to us and said, "My spouse is my wife is basically fertile, you know, 10 days out of the month. So you're telling me that for 10 days out of the month, we can't have sex?" And I'm like, "No."
We're not telling you anything. We're
I
just
I say
you're informing
I
you,
saying you have the information now.
right,
You know that your wife is fertile generally, generally from the 10th to the 20th of the month or whatever,
right, however it works out.
however that works out. We're saying that if you want to practice NFP, then for those 10 days, you
You are
have
abstaining.
you have to abstain. Or if you're like, just got back from deployment, then okay, great. You have to accept or be ready that 9 months later you get to name your love,
Amen.
which is,
And it gets challenging in perimenopause, very challenging, because in perimenopause, we sometimes will have longer periods.
right.
We'll have longer fertile phases or where mucus is present, and we're like, I don't know if I'm actually ovulating or if I'm not. And so that abstinence becomes even more challenging. And it really puts a strain sometimes on the marriage. And that's why, the earlier you begin practicing NFP, i.e. from the day you get married, that conversation is challenging, but it's less challenging than if it's a new concept in your marriage. I know that it's hard. It was challenging for you, very challenging when the priest had kind of offered that opportunity to us, because you were like, but we've already gone to confession. Why do we have to do this? And that's what redemptive suffering is all about.
Hmm.
Yeah, you were not happy.
No.
But now we're in a season of our life where I'm post menopause. And
Right.
so the times that we're actually physically intimate with one another they're beautiful and wonderful, but they're not what they once were in our youth.
It's a matter of quality over
There
quantity.
you go.
Bum, 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 bum. But but again, that's, this is many of the conversations that we've had with young women because they have irregular cycles. What?
Right.
I can't believe I'm talking about this, but okay, yes. Irregular cycles, or it's like, well, I have a period every 3 months. And I'm like, you what? Because they've either got what is it?
PCOS or different, yeah.
PCOS, wacky hormones,
Endometriosis. There's all kinds of
endometriosis,
things. Yeah.
or they just are, as my mama would say, you're too skinny. You need to eat, right?
Yeah. There are many women
I
that are
mean,
very thin
they're
and,
very
and
thin
don't have
and
enough body fat to bring it on.
right. And who'd have thought,
One of my aunts actually was a collegiate swimmer, and she was so thin and fit that she actually had to take medication to bring her period on.
Right. I mean, this
And
is
this was like pre the pill and all of that. So,
yeah. I mean, so
yeah,
that's one of the benefits again is
you get to know your body
get to
really,
know
really
your
well.
body, and then you get to have that conversation with your spouse. So the practical tips are, again, as always,
Mhm.
nowadays, these here days, there are lots and lots of resources. We'll put some in the show
Show
notes.
notes,
Show
yes.
notes.
Mhm.
But now there's an up. When
Yes.
we taught it, we're like, okay, you get your graph paper and you mark these little and you draw the little and the guys were like, oh yeah, I can do this.
Yeah, the engineer.
The women are like, you want me to what?
Yeah.
Now, of course,
There's an app.
there's an app.
You
There are
can pee
great.
on a stick. There's so many different ways to do
Yeah,
it.
and
Yeah.
and there's different things, if you're not into taking your temperature at 5 a.m. every morning for the rest of your life, there's all kinds of ways that you
Mhm.
can do it. Again, it's a conversation
So
to have with your doctor
and your spouse
and your spouse
together. So what
because teamwork makes
makes
the
the dream
dream work,
work?
right? That was the
Amen.
one thing we told them in our class is the thing about the symptothermal method that we talked about is it literally takes a
2 of
team
you.
to do
Yeah.
it, right? So that you can do the chart and you can sort of, interpret the chart. And then as part of that, once you've done this over time, and we had, some women, they're like, oh yeah, I've been charting for 10 years. Got all my charts. And I know, they're like, I know that my fertile time is,
Here. Boom.
the 7th through the 12th. give or take a day.
Mhm.
And
Great.
I'm like, "Great."
I never knew that.
But,
Yeah. So
anyway.
let's, it also, I don't want to neglect the spiritual aspect of NFP because really, I think, yes, the physicality is very, very important, but I also think that the spiritual aspect of it is even more important because what it does is it deepens your trust in God and his plan for your family, right? We are blessed to have several friends who never practiced NFP. And what I mean by that is they never they were open to life from the beginning of their marriage. And like one family we know, they had 4 kids and never did a chart, never did anything. They had 4 children in like 8 years. That's great, you know? We have other families that have had much larger families and are always thrilled to have a new life. We have some families that, one of their kids maybe had severe disabilities and they were concerned after the birth of that child, do we have another child? We know families that have a genetic disorder within their family, within their genome. So therefore, once they discovered by the birth of the second child that this genetic deformity exists, they abstain because that is the decision they have made with the Lord to, yeah, I don't even know how to end that. It's just hard, you guys. It's just hard. We've always spoken to you quite honestly and very openly. And I know that then NFP brings about a lot of passionate responses. Um,
Okay, I'm gonna tell you my story here. This is my favorite, and it'll embarrass Mary, but I don't care. So, we were doing
it
an
will
NFP
embarrass Mary.
class,
Oh, okay.
so, like, I don't know, maybe our 3rd or 4th one, so we were just kinda getting into our rhythm, so we started describing some of the ways that you
We're talking
can.
about tacky mucus. Go ahead. I just ripped off the band aid. Go ahead.
Okay, yes, we were talking about tacky mucus, and this lady gets and
One
this
of the attendees
one of the attendees is, like,
was offended
offended. She's like, "Oh my gosh, we are talking that is gross. Why are we talking about this?" And she got up
and she left
and she left.
the
And I'm
class.
like, and I'm standing there and I'm going, and all the other couples are like, "What just happened? What's
And they're
going on?"
looking at us to see what we're
I
gonna
go there and I
say.
said, "Okay, people, here it is.
Sex is messy.
Sex is messy.
Yep.
Okay? Let's just talk about it. I mean, in so many ways, right? Psychological, mentally, physically, right? So, yeah, if you haven't figured that out, there's a lot of bodily fluid exchange involved in sex. And if this offends you, then you clearly were not paying attention in 6th grade gym class. Because
Well, some people never had it, sex ed class and stuff.
I
So
well,
I was opted out
I
by my
know, but I mean,
parents.
like, seriously, this offends you that there are bodily fluids exchanged during sex? Okay, so let's go back to the beginning when a mommy and a daddy love each other. So, yeah, we didn't pull any punches,
No.
and we got a lot of questions. As Mary says, this is a very passionate topic among people,
Right.
Catholic and
Christian
Christian,
and
right?
secular.
And secular, right?
So I would get a lot of questions. One of the questions for this podcast was, what does the church teach about sex in general? And I'm just going to give you the theology of the body answer that I was given, which is all parts of the body are kissable. But when a man is going to come to fruition, he must do that within the womb of his wife. Okay. So
I'm
I'm
glad you did that part.
I'm going to let you all be adults about this and know that, right? And if that doesn't happen, if he comes to fruition outside the womb, then that is a mortal sin, okay? And that must go to confession. So, like I said, in our own journey, we have committed that sin. That's all you need to know is that, there was an addiction to pornography that existed within our marriage and that the Lord came in. And I'm telling you, the restoration and the redemption that he has done within our marriage bed, within our intimate life is truly miraculous and it's beautiful and it's wonderful. And our understanding of love versus lust and the physical intimacy that is possible between a man and a woman, even if pregnancy is not possible. Now, Can you hand me that piece of paper? I want to really be specific here about what it says if you are, the church recognizes that not every married couple will be able to have children. They acknowledge the pain and the struggle that infertility can bring to couples. In its teachings, the church emphasizes that the dignity of all married couples, regardless of their ability to conceive, and the importance of love and their unity in marriage. Okay, so in Catechism 2379, it says the gospel shows that physical sterility is not an absolute evil. Spouses who still suffer from infertility after exhausting legitimate medical procedures should unite themselves with the Lord's cross, the source of all spiritual faithfulness. They can give expression to their generosity by adopting abandoned children or performing demanding services for others. The church encourages couples facing infertility to consider other ways to express their parental love, such as adoption, of course, acts of service. It encourages them to seek support from their faith community and to trust in God's plan, even in the midst of this difficulty. Now, there is something in the church we call spiritual motherhood. And a component of that is spiritual parenthood. This is something that every woman is built for. We are built to hold another soul underneath our heart. Literally, that's what our womb is for. And when, for whatever reason, the Lord does not bless that, does not allow that to happen, he allows infertility to happen, which is, he didn't create. That's a creation of sin in our world, in a fallen world. Then this beautiful opportunity exists for spiritual motherhood. When I ended my ability to have other children, the Lord saw that. He forgave me for that. And then he brought me 10 godchildren, 20 nieces and nephews, and more spiritual children than Jerry and I could have ever physically had of our bodies. Okay? He will bless the restoration. He will bless the redemption. And he will give you the people in your life to love and to mentor and to be spiritual parents to.
Yes. Oh, you're on a roll. I'm not going to interrupt you. Go ahead.
So are we spiritual parents?
Oh, yes. Which
It's awesome.
It is awesome. I appreciate the fact that I've reached the stage of the wise old sage. Like, people, let me tell you how not to screw this up. See, that's usually how it goes. It's not like, let me impart upon you my wisdom. It's like, let me tell you how not to
don't
screw
do what we
this
did.
Don't do what we did.
Yeah,
right?
don't be
I mean, there you go. There's your starting argument. Don't do what we did.
Because it changes your life forever. Like I said, the practical implications of not having a bigger family are with us even today.
Yep.
And it's hard some days. Some days we look around at some others in our lives and that made different choices, and we're like, gosh, we messed that up. But then when that happens to us, we also give that over to the Lord. We put that at the foot of the cross and we ask for his grace and for his mercy, so that, we don't wallow in that. I think we did for a time, but we don't anymore because the Lord has been so merciful and so gracious to us. So that is, I have no idea if that was helpful. I pray that it was to you about natural family planning and what the church teaches about it and the beauty of it and the hardship of it, the challenge of it and the connectedness of it. So it's, it's like joy and sorrow. It just goes hand in hand.
Right. And it's never easy.
Never easy.
But it is worthwhile.
It is very much worthwhile. Amen to that.
Okay.
Okay, so now it's time for the not so newlywed game, and I picked out
grabbed
the
the cards. Okay.
So here we go. Okay.
Okay.
So our first question, Jerry Don Lenaburg, is what do you most look forward to about getting old?
Senior citizen discounts.
That is such an honest answer.
Not gonna lie.
You know what I look forward to in getting old?
Actually, the other thing is I get to speak my mind.
Yes. But honey, you always have spoken your mind.
Yeah, but now I really do, because I am at that old coot stage where I can just tell you exactly what I think.
Oh, that's scary.
Especially
when you do that.
after a bourbon.
Oh boy. Okay. So what am I looking forward to getting old? I don't know, everything that used to live in Connecticut now lives in North Dakota. I mean, South Dakota. No, even further south in Hawaii, really. And that's kind of disconcerting. I look forward to spending time with grandchildren, and I look forward to I have the freedom now that of my time that I haven't had in my younger years, where I can, you and I can say, "Hey, do you want to go and do X, Y, and Z?" And most of the time we're like, "Yeah, we can do that. We have that
Mhm.
freedom." So,
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's what I look forward to.
Mhm.
Am sort of living right now in my
Mhm.
midlife. Okay, next question. What is the biggest point of contention in our relationship? And how should we be working on these?
Sweetheart, that's an entire another podcast.
Do you want to save that for the next podcast?
Well, we're going to do it at our next conference for the engaged.
We are. So what is the biggest point of contention?
Money, 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 money.
Money. Yeah. That is the biggest point of contention.
Here she comes. Go money, money.
No, hey,
Yeah.
I hate a budget, don't you? That's my
Mhm.
new lyric.
Mhm.
Yes, that is the biggest point of contention
For us.
for us. Yes. And how do we work on it, dear? We have this thing called a budget. It's not a diet, it's just a budget.
Mhm.
And Mary has a very challenging time sticking to it.
Mhm.
Yes, because Mary's first love language is gifts.
To herself.
Gift giving. That is not true. Do I not give you gifts every day of your life? Go ahead, say no.
On the advice of counsel, I'm going to invoke the Fifth Amendment and my right against
How do we work on these
self-incrimination.
things?
Well, it's every day.
Yeah.
Every day.
It's a conversation about the purpose behind the
Need
purchase
versus
want.
want.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the fact that I'm getting older and I want to retire before I'm dead.
that too. So we're still working on it, people. Still working on it. Okay. Jerry, next question.
Oh, Lordy.
What makes you nervous?
You and a Target.
You knew you were going to say that.
You and Target makes me very nervous.
When Mary says, "Hey, I got to go run errands."
Yeah.
That makes you nervous.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That's legit. That's legit fair. I get
Mhm.
it. What makes me nervous?
When I say, "Hey, y'all, watch this."
Yeah, pretty much.
When a certain deacon and I start blowing up fireworks for the 4th of July.
Oh my gosh. We live in a state where you're allowed to have your own fireworks. It should
It's
be illegal.
epic.
It's bad.
It's like, can we blow up the deacon? A couple of years we almost did.
Almost
Just
did.
saying.
Yeah, that makes me nervous. There's not really much makes me nervous.
Except after I've had 2 bourbons.
Yes,
and we're in
then
a crowd of people.
That's bad.
That's
Yeah,
bad.
that's true. Okay, last question.
Yes.
If you were famous, what would you be famous for?
My wit and wisdom. You laugh.
I was
Why
going to
do you
say
laugh?
your unfiltered responses.
My wit and wisdom. Exactly.
Okay, what would I be famous for?
You would be famous for being like the world's biggest encourager, cheerleader, rah-rah person. Or your chicken fried steak, either way.
If I were famous,
You'd be famous for your earring collection.
I would
right?
be famous
Can I get
for
an amen, people? If she's ever famous, it's going to be for her statement earrings.
Yes.
Amen.
That's
Done.
really a sad thing to be famous for, but
And
okay.
yet,
And yet.
you were watching Reels last night. Look, honey. And you
Oh, how
showed me.
they
You're
make-
so proud. You're like, look, I'm watching how they make clay earrings.
Clay earrings.
And you
It's
were watching
fascinating
this
to
for
me.
like 20 minutes.
I was.
I'm like, it's not that. I don't watch how they, distill whiskey for 20 minutes.
Excuse me. Yes, you do. You've watched an entire documentary on Irish versus the
Okay, that was true because
Scottish
they got to
Lay in the barley.
I'm like, yes, bucket list. We're going to Scotland and we're laying in
and
the barley.
Okay. Anyways, so yes, we end this with some humor because sometimes NFP can be a tough one, but
I could do my NFP dance, but they won't see it on the podcast.
no, let's not do that. No. We're not doing that.
Well,
Okay.
that's only for a live audience, live studio audience. Dun, 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 dun.
Anyways, if you guys have comments, if you have helpful tips, if you have, you want to share your own experiences, please do. What are you making that face for?
What face?
That face where you're like,
Oh, I'm trying to read the phone number.
okay, I can read it. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Okay.
I have to get the bifocal part
Please
of the glasses.
do follow us on YouTube. Give us a follow, a subscribe, and a follow. I'll leave a comment, a review, whether you hated it, you loved it, whatever. Just write something. We'll take it. Follow us on all of the Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Wherever you listen to podcasts, we will be there. If you would like to leave us a voice message or a text on this episode or any of our previous episodes, you can do so at 571-354-0351. 571-354-0351. You can also reach out to us by direct message on Instagram. The Mary and Jerry Podcast, or at The Grouchy Historian is Jerry's Instagram, or at Mary Lenaburg is mine. You can, what else can they do?
Smoke signals, carrier pigeon, Morse code, all of those.
If you have a suggestion for that's Morse code.
Yeah, I know.
If you have a suggestion for a future podcast episode, we are open to any and all suggestions. We're excited about some of the things we have coming.
We're open to the suggestions. That does not necessarily mean it will be a podcast.
Correct, but we'll take the idea.
If you want to do a podcast about turkey bacon and its benefits, no.
That'll be a very short podcast. Talk about turkey bacon. Yuck. No benefits.
Yep.
Done. All right. So thank you so much for joining us this week on the Mary and Jerry Podcast. I'm Mary.
I'm Jerry.
Until next time, God bless.